Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to a new episode of Pakistan Zindabad. Today we are discussing Chapter 2 of Resilient Defense Pakistan and the Next War Doctrine, a foundational chapter that provides a guiding framework for understanding the wars of the future. This book is written by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer, in which he clearly explains that modern warfare is no longer shaped by a single weapon, but by a convergence of multiple structural disruptors. Artificial intelligence, drones, cyber, space, and information warfare, these are not separate domains. They are interconnected forces that directly challenge decision-making speed, national resilience, and crisis stability. In this episode, we will explore the 9 structural disruptors that define the character of the next war, and also why, for Pakistan, they represent not only risk, but strategic clarity as well.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower.
It's good to be back.
Today, we're really launching into a focused analysis, one that I think moves beyond the immediate headlines and looks squarely at the defining forces that are shaping conflict over the next decade.
We're going deep on this one.
We are. And our source material for this deep dive is highly specific. We are tearing into Chapter 2 of the book, Resilient Defense, Pakistan, and the Next War Doctrine, which was written by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer.
In this chapter, it lays out a really rigorous framework. It identifies 9 core structural disruptors that are going to define the battlefield between, well, the 2026 and 2036 timeframe.
It's an essential study, isn't it? Because it just forces you to reconsider your basic assumptions about security.
It does. We aren't here to talk about, some hypothetical future weapon or a niche technology. Our focus is on these profound systemic shifts that are changing the economics, the physics, and even the social contract of warfare itself.
So our mission today is pretty clear.
I think so. It's to give you, our listener, a really thorough analysis of these 9 disruptors. But more importantly, to understand why they all collectively demand a radical pivot toward what the author calls a resilient defense posture.
Okay, let's unpack that core thesis right away. Mr. Meer starts from a really compelling premise, which is that modern conflict isn't changed by a single flashy new piece of hardware.
No, not at all. It's changed by a set of these enduring structural disruptors.
So disruption isn't the surprise anymore, it's the new normal. It's the actual structure of the conflict.
Precisely. These are not just passing trends, they're enduring features of this new AI-enabled battlefield. And the most fascinating point in the source material, for me, is that they act as asymmetric stressors.
What do you mean by that, asymmetric stressors?
Well, they don't impact everyone equally. Think of it like this. If your entire defense establishment is built on, let's say, rigidity, on slow bureaucratic processes, and it prioritizes these huge, expensive, platform-centric systems.
Like an aircraft carrier or a massive centralized command bunker.
Exactly, those things. These disruptors will heavily, heavily penalize you. They are designed almost to target inflexibility.
So the system that wins is the one that minimizes its exposure, its surface area, to these specific stressors.
You've got it. They reward the complete opposite qualities. Deep integration, speed and recovery, and crucially, institutional agility. They become a force multiplier, not for sheer firepower, but for adaptation.
So a smaller force, if it can adapt and recover faster than a bigger, more ponderous opponent, actually finds the asymmetry working in its favor.
That's the core of it. And this is why this whole doctrine of resilient defense is so vital. It's designed specifically to absorb that asymmetric stress.
I really appreciate that framing. It means the answer isn't just to outspend your rival on the same old, expensive equipment.
No, the answer is primarily intellectual. It's organizational. It's about reorganizing how you think, how you decide, and how you sustain your operations when you're under constant pressure.
And for you, the listener, the stakes here are fundamental. We're talking national security, economic resilience, crisis stability. The source book doesn't just list these challenges. For every single disruptor we cover, it poses a direct planning question.
A real-world challenge that has to be solved.
Exactly. So let's unpack those 9 foundational challenges now, starting with the new kinetic reality, the reality defined by speed.
Let's do it.
So we have to start at the epicenter of this whole doctrinal change. Artificial intelligence.
The big one.
The big one. And the book is explicit. AI's primary function isn't necessarily about, pulling the trigger. Its most profound operational impact is as a decision technology.
That's the key. It doesn't just improve warfighting. It fundamentally compresses the timeline for conflict. It hyper-accelerates that classic military cycle, the O-Day loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act.
And that compression, that's the real difference between industrial age warfare and the AI age, isn't it?
It is. Historically, the OODA-loop speed was limited by human cognition and, communication delays. AI just removes both of those constraints. The source meticulously details three primary ways it does this.
Okay, what's the first?
It starts with the absolute deluge of information. AI has to fuse vast volumes of sensor data in near real time. Think about the scale of modern reconnaissance satellites, drones, ground signals, intelligence.
You're talking about petabytes of data, even in a small conflict. A human team just can't keep up.
They can't. Perfect information is useless if it arrives 4 hours late. It's just historical data at that point, not operational intelligence. AI's advantage here isn't just speed, it's synthesis. It's integrating everything into one coherent picture milliseconds after it's collected.
And that leads to the second function, I imagine.
It does, and in my view, this is the most strategic one. Highlighting anomalies and patterns that human analysts routinely miss.
Because we're biased. We look for what we expect to find.
Exactly. Expectation bias, cognitive overload, simple fatigue. AI doesn't have those. It can spot the tiny, faint electromagnetic signature that shows a critical system is about to activate, or track that subtle deviation in a convoy's route that means a high-value asset is hiding in plain sight.
So it's forcing a commander to look outside their existing mental model of the battlefield.
Absolutely. And then the third function connects all this new awareness directly to that commander. It's about prioritizing targets, risks, and responses when that commander is operating under immense uncertainty and time pressure.
So instead of 5,000 pieces of information, the AI says, here are the top 3 targets with the highest asymmetric payoff.
Or, here's the response path that carries the lowest risk of triggering some unwanted strategic escalation. It just drastically reduces the cognitive load during that decide phase.
This speed, it sounds almost irresistible, but the book correctly highlights the paradox of automation and its vulnerabilities.
Ah, yes. If you rely entirely on that speed, you introduce some profound systemic dangers.
Let's talk about those risks. The first one is human, not technological.
It is. It's automation bias. The tendency for commanders to just implicitly trust the machine, to cede their critical judgment because the AI's output arrived faster and looked more sophisticated. That erosion of human skepticism is deadly.
And then there's the black box problem, right? The opaque decision logic.
A huge problem. If the AI is built on deep neural networks, it might make a correct, game-changing decision, but be completely unable to explain why.
And if accountability is paramount, or if you need to explain the decision to political leadership, that's a disaster. Plus, how do you debug a black box in the middle of a fight?
You can't. And that leads directly to adversarial risks. The source highlights things like data poisoning, subtly feeding the AI corrupted data over time, not to break it, but to shift its orientation.
You're not killing the engine, you're just miscalibrating the compass.
Perfectly put. An AI trained on slightly poisoned inputs might consistently misprioritize targets at the most critical moment. Then there's adversarial manipulation, where an enemy exploits a known flaw in your AI's algorithm to trigger a predictable incorrect response.
This friction, this tension between speed and safety, it forces the core planning question that Mr. Meer poses. How do you accelerate decision-making without surrendering human judgment, accountability, and escalation control?
And the doctrinal solution offered is rigid on this point. AI must be treated purely as a decision support layer, never as an autonomous authority for kinetic action.
So the whole focus shifts to developing human-machine teaming protocols.
Sophisticated ones, yes. And this human-machine teaming, or HMT, it must be built specifically for contested and degraded environments. The AI provides the speed, but the human retains the ultimate authority for approval and ethical review.
But I have to ask, if we're chasing hyperspeed, isn't demanding a human veto in milliseconds? Isn't the human just the ultimate bottleneck? Doesn't that defeat the purpose?
That is the core tension the doctrine has to resolve. And the human is a bottleneck if the AI just presents raw data. But if the AI curates the options down to 3 choices and clearly articulates the risk and reward for each, the human decision can be compressed into a high-confidence choice.
So it's not a frantic scramble.
Exactly. The goal isn't full autonomy. It's optimal augmented intelligence. It's about making a better decision, not just a faster one.
Okay, so if AI is changing the speed of decisions, what's the kinetic threat that actually exploits that speed? That brings us right to Disruptor 2, drones and loitering munitions.
And the source highlights that this is, first and foremost, an economic revolution in conflict. It completely inverts the cost equation.
This is probably the most visible disruptor we're seeing play out globally right now.
Without a doubt. For decades, military strategy was based on a calculable exchange rate. Expensive platform versus expensive counter-platform. You spend billions on heavy armor, advanced fighter jets, layered missile defenses.
And now, a system that costs less than a luxury car, sometimes just $10,000 or $20,000, can credibly threaten or destroy a multi-billion-dollar asset.
It makes every high-value target economically vulnerable, if not obsolete, if it could be struck by a cheap disposable system.
And the source details some key advantages beyond just the cheap price tag.
It does. First is low-cost persistent surveillance. You can just saturate an area with drones for continuous observation without risking pilots or major platforms.
Guaranteeing awareness over critical spots.
Right. Second, they offer precision strike options without pilot risk. If a drone is lost, it's a minor economic write-off. It's not a strategic or, more importantly, a human loss. That lets commanders accept much higher risk when engaging targets.
But the critical advantage, the one that really breaks the system, is the ability to achieve saturation capability. This is where the physics of defense just breaks down.
Absolutely. Traditional, exquisite air defense systems, your advanced surface-to-air missiles, they're designed to handle a limited number of high-speed, high-signature threats. They're expensive, complex, and slow to reload.
And if an adversary can deploy a network swarm of 50 or 100 or even 500 cheap synchronized drones for the cost of one or two of your defensive missiles,
that air defense system is inevitably overwhelmed. It's a pure numbers game. It's an economy of scale problem where the defender's always losing the cost per kill ratio. You can't win that exchange.
so the challenge just shifts dramatically. It's no longer about defending against a few cruise missiles. The core planning question Mr. Meer poses is about protecting critical national infrastructure.
We're talking air bases, dams, ports, energy facilities, fixed command centers, the national backbone.
This elevates the threat from a tactical annoyance to a strategic, almost existential vulnerability.
That's the perfect way to put it. In past conflicts, you could safely assume your rear area, airbase, or logistics hub was secure. That assumption is now completely invalid. Every single fixed critical node is a viable target for a mass economically efficient attack.
Which means?
It means comprehensive layered counter-drone defense, or CUAS, is now a foundational requirement of this resilient defense posture. It's not an optional add-on or a secondary capability. It has to be there from the ground up.
So what does that layered defense actually look like in practice, especially against a saturation attack? You can't just fire more expensive missiles at it.
No, you'd go broke.
Yeah.
It requires diversification. So layer one has to be electronic warfare, jamming and spoofing to break the drone's command links or its GPS.
A soft kill.
A soft kill. Layer two would be other non-kinetic systems, like high-energy lasers or high-power microwaves. They offer cheap, high-rate-of-fire defense against swarms because their cost per shot is basically negligible.
And then you still need a hard kill option?
You do. But layer three has to involve kinetic options that are cheap, fast, and reloadable. Think rapid-fire cannon systems or specialized small interceptors. The resilience is in the diversity of the layers. If one fails, another takes over.
That makes sense. This leads logically to Disruptor 3, which builds on the first two. The revolutionary idea of precision combined with mass.
And the source emphasizes that for the entire industrial age, precision and mass were a fundamental trade-off. You couldn't have both.
Right. You could have widespread, inaccurate artillery fire, that's mass, or you could have extremely accurate but low-volume, costly airstrikes. That's precision.
But the AI era, fueled by cheap sensors and networked intelligence, breaks that trade-off completely. The source points to advances in three areas happening at once. Tiny, high-fidelity sensors, network guidance systems, often using AI for real-time correction, and cheap manufactured platforms.
Which allows?
It allows large numbers of systems to coordinate precise effects at scale. Think of a complex maneuver where 100 loitering munitions, 50 drones, and 10 cruise missiles all coordinate their attacks to hit 160 different points across 30 dispersed targets.
All within the same 60-second window.
Exactly, and each element hitting with pinpoint accuracy. The military effect of that is devastating. It allows attrition to be imposed economically and sustainably. You're not relying on one single expensive surgical strike. You're systematically degrading the adversary's capacity over time.
So this capability is what drives that shift toward cost imposition strategies.
It is. The goal moves away from a single decisive blow, that knockout punch strategy, and transforms into applying sustained system-wide pressure on the adversary. You're degrading their command and control, their logistics, their power grid, and their morale all at the same time.
The objective is to make the conflict just unbearable over an extended period.
Unbearable economically, logistically, and institutionally, day after day.
So this presents a paralyzing situation for a defense planner. If every target can be hit precisely and the systems doing it are affordable enough to be used in mass, the core question becomes, how do defenses stay effective?
You can't budget your way out of it by trying to defend every single point perfectly. It's impossible.
And that's the critical realization that drives this whole resilient defense doctrine. You have to abandon the goal of perfect defense.
You have to. The strategy has to shift to survival and recovery. It has to rely on functional redundancy, dispersal, and recovery capabilities.
So let's break those down. Functional redundancy.
It means you understand your mission flow, and you ensure that if your primary command center is destroyed, a secondary or tertiary center, maybe miles away with a different communication architecture, can instantly take over the mission without a hiccup.
So it's not just having a backup generator, it's having a backup function located somewhere else entirely.
Precisely. And then dispersal ensures no single strike is catastrophic. You distribute your assets, maybe using deception or mobility. And finally, recovery means having the industrial and technical capacity to quickly repair, reconstitute, or replace critical components while under fire.
Resilience, defined as the ability to take a hit and keep fighting, completely supersedes mere defense.
That's the shift.
Okay, we've established this new kinetic reality. Now we have to move to the contested invisible domains. These are the environments that determine if those kinetic forces can even function. We have to start with Disruptor 4, electronic warfare.
Right. If the new kinetic reality is the fist, then electronic warfare, or EW, is the nervous system. Control of the electromagnetic spectrum is now a core operational domain, just as important as land, sea, or air.
Because everything modern relies on it.
Everything. Radio frequency communication, radar, satellite links. If you can't operate in the spectrum, your billion-dollar hardware is effectively deaf, blind, and dumb.
Let's detail the exact mechanisms of EW. It's not just simple jamming, is it? It's more insidious than that.
Much more. It degrades the fundamental nervous system of the military by jamming data links, sure, but also by spoofing GPS signals telling a platform it's here when it's actually 100 miles over there. But the deepest effect is undermining overall confidence in your own information systems.
That's the strategic goal, then.
Absolutely. If a commander gets a tactical update, but the channel has been momentarily contaminated by some sophisticated interference, they start to doubt the information's legitimacy. That doubt, that ambiguity, slows down the ODA loop far more effectively than a kinetic strike.
And what makes EW so attractive, especially in what Mr. Meer calls gray zone competition, is its deniability.
Oh, completely. The effects are often ambiguous, they're not permanent, and they are incredibly difficult to attribute. You can cripple a neighbor's navigation or telecom services without firing a missile. The disruption happens, but proving who did it and whether it was an act of war is hugely challenging.
It allows for significant disruption without that immediate kinetic escalation.
Which is a perfect example of an asymmetric stressor. It forces the critical operational question for any defense establishment. Can your forces operate coherently when GPS, data links, and secure comms are partially or fully degraded?
The assumption that you'll always have connectivity, which drove a generation of military modernization, is now a profound liability.
It's a critical vulnerability.
So what does the resilient defense doctrine demand in response?
It demands the institutional acceptance that connectivity degradation is normal. It's not a rare, exceptional event. Forces must be trained extensively for function under denial.
What does that look like?
It means a radical shift toward things like low-emission protocols, where your systems transmit as little as possible to avoid being detected and targeted. It means decentralized command, where forward units can execute missions with minimal guidance for long periods. And critically, it means rebuilding proficiency in analog backups.
Old school map reading.
Expert map reading, messenger relays, burst communications. You have to ensure that a failure in the digital nervous system doesn't mean complete operational paralysis. Robustness has to be engineered back into the system.
Even if that means sacrificing some of that peak digital efficiency.
Especially then.
This is closely related to Disruptor 5, cyber operations as continuous competition. But it's distinct in its persistence.
That's the key insight in the source. Cyber conflict doesn't wait for a war to be declared, and it doesn't stop for ceasefires. It is an enduring 24/7, 365 domain of competition. It's always on.
And its primary function during peacetime is what? Reconnaissance?
Reconnaissance, absolutely. And pre-positioning. probing, collecting intelligence, implanting malware, and just generally preparing the environment for future operations.
And the nature of the targets here, it dramatically blurs the lines between civilian and military security. The book details critical targets like industrial control systems, supply chains, financial systems.
And crucially, information integrity itself.
So why does targeting a civilian bank or a power grid suddenly become a major military concern?
Because modern military mobilization is utterly dependent on national continuity. If the national power grid fails, your air defenses can't function. The rail network can't move troops. The financial system collapses, making procurement impossible. By hitting these civilian systems, an adversary achieves strategic military disruption without ever engaging a single soldier.
So national resilience, just keeping lights on, becomes a core military concern.
It has to be.
This leads to a huge security challenge. How does the nation protect its continuity power, telecoms, finance, when cyber pressure is constant and, maybe more importantly, attribution is so uncertain?
Attribution is the profound destabilizing factor. An attack might be launched via proxy servers in 3 continents, routed through some non-state actor or criminal group. It's almost impossible to respond kinetically against the true state sponsor.
If a major port is crippled, do you retaliate against the state you suspect is responsible and risk a massive escalation? Or do you just absorb the damage?
That pressure demands a totally different type of defense, which is why the Doctrine's answer is a whole-of-nation approach.
It can't just be the military's job.
No way. It requires seamless integration between the military cyber command, civilian intelligence agencies, and, critically, the private sector, which owns and operates most of the nation's critical infrastructure.
The banks, the telecom companies, the energy firms.
All of them. The defense of a private server is now part of the national defense architecture. This is consistent with a citizen-centric security model, where national security really starts at the local router.
Okay, our final contested invisible domain is space. Disruptor 6 is all about persistent ISR intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and the growing contestation of space, the ultimate high ground.
It truly is. It's the foundation of modern situational awareness. Everything from communications and GPS navigation to strategic missile launch warnings and deep intelligence collection, it all relies on systems orbiting the Earth.
If you dominate or deny space, you cripple an adversary's ability to wage modern war.
You do. But those exquisite high-value space systems are increasingly vulnerable. The source explains the threat spectrum is broad. You've got electronic jamming and spoofing targeting the signal. You've got cyber intrusion trying to take control of a satellite remotely.
And then there's the kinetic stuff.
Right. Kinetic and non-kinetic counterspace measures. Everything from ground-based lasers designed to blind satellite sensors to highly complex anti-satellite missiles, or ASATs.
And the vulnerability here is that these assets are incredibly expensive and take years, maybe a decade, to design and launch.
Exactly. If your core communication satellite is destroyed, that capability gap can't be filled quickly. It creates a massive strategic weak point, which leads to the core planning question. How does the military ensure continuity of awareness when these critical systems are degraded, denied, or disrupted?
This sounds like an unavoidable massive budget problem. How do you defend something moving at 17,000 miles per hour?
Well, the doctrinal answer isn't to try and defend every asset perfectly. It's to build survivability into the architecture itself. The resilient defense doctrine dictates reliance on redundancy, diversification, and graceful degradation.
What does that mean in practice? Redundancy.
It means moving away from a few large, expensive satellites in geostationary orbit and embracing large constellations of smaller, cheaper, mass-produced satellites in low Earth orbit, or EO. If you shoot down one LEO satellite, another one replaces its function within minutes.
So you turn the economic advantage of mass from Disruptor 2 back on the adversary by making your targets cheap and numerous.
You got it. And diversification means not relying solely on space for position, navigation, and timing. You have to have robust terrestrial systems, advanced inertial navigation systems that don't need external signals, even celestial navigation backups.
And graceful degradation.
That's essential. The system must be designed to keep functioning, even at a reduced capacity after taking damage, rather than failing catastrophically and going offline immediately. You have to assume the high ground will be contested and potentially lost.
Okay, we've covered the kinetic threats and the invisible domains. Now we shift to what might be the most difficult group, the institutional and human challenge. These disruptors affect the people, the logistics, and the thinking of the defense establishment itself. We start with Disruptor 7, information warfare.
and information warfare, or IW, it fundamentally shifts the goal of the conflict. It's not about how battles are physically fought anymore.
It's about how events are understood. It targets perception, legitimacy, and social cohesion. It's about winning the war in people's minds.
It's about destroying the political will to fight. And modern IW operates with incredible speed and sophistication, largely by exploiting social media dynamics, which are engineered to amplify emotion over verified truth.
It's designed to generate uncertainty and distrust in official channels, government, military, traditional media.
That's the core tactic, actively blurring truth and falsehood, using deepfakes, manipulated narratives, and micro-targeting to make it genuinely impossible for citizens and decision-makers to figure out what's real during a crisis.
This strategy explicitly targets social cohesion. The goal is to break that crucial link between the state and its public. If the public loses faith in what their own government is telling them, the military's legitimacy just erodes.
And mobilization efforts, national resilience, they can all collapse from within. This creates an immediate crisis stability problem. The core planning question here is existential. How does a nation protect its cohesion and maintain credibility when the entire information environment is contaminated and contested?
You can't shoot down a deepfake video with a missile.
You cannot.
I see the pressure point. If your tank crews see a fabricated video online showing their commanding officer has surrendered, they might hesitate, even for a second, regardless of the physical reality.
And that hesitation is the strategic victory for the adversary. The insight here is profound. Public trust and credible communication become strategic assets, just as important as military hardware.
So a defense establishment has to prioritize building that trust during peacetime.
Through transparent, consistent, and proactive communication, yes. You need rapid response capabilities to identify and counter false narratives, not with censorship, but by immediately providing verified facts from trusted sources. Institutional credibility is the most important shield against IW.
Let's move to the less glamorous but utterly crucial element, logistics. Disruptor 8 is logistics disruption and sustainment vulnerability.
And historically, logistics was considered a protected rear area function. But the source stresses that modern forces rely on these complex, globalized supply chains that are incredibly brittle.
We've optimized for efficiency, right? Just-in-time logistics.
We have. And that relies on a continuous, uninterrupted flow from specialized, often singular, global suppliers. This is massively vulnerable to cyber attacks on shipping manifests, information manipulation, and, crucially, political constraints.
If you rely on one foreign nation for a specific microchip, your entire operational tempo can be dictated by their political stance during a conflict.
That external dependence is a massive liability, and that's the critical shift. Logistics is no longer safe in the rear. It's a frontline vulnerability, subject to targeted disruption. If an adversary knows the exact ship carrying the specialized radar part you need, they can use a cheap loitering munition or a cyber attack to destroy that single point of failure.
So the core planning question is fundamental. Can you sustain operations when your supply chains are disrupted, contested, or politically constrained?
If your core fighting platforms are unusable because they need a part that only one factory in the world produces, you have sacrificed your operational autonomy for peacetime cost savings.
How does the resilient defense doctrine counter this?
It demands a fundamental reevaluation of procurement. The doctrine elevates maintainability, local repair capability, and supply chain resilience above that dependence on external support.
So we're moving back toward simpler, more robust, maintainable equipment.
Yes. And crucially, moving away from just-in-time logistics, which is efficient but brittle, toward a just-in-case model. JIC prioritizes strategic stockpiling, redundancy in suppliers, and, importantly, developing local additive manufacturing capability,
3D
printing, to rapidly produce spare parts closer to the front line, bypassing crippled conventional supply chains. It's about building strategic depth and self-reliance back into the logistics architecture.
And this brings us to the ninth, and you could argue the most crucial challenge of all, because it's the non-technological one that determines success across all the others.
Training, adaptation, and learning speed.
The institutional disruptor. The ability to simply learn faster than the adversary.
This is the meta challenge. If your organization's OD loop is slow, you will fail against an adversary that can rapidly integrate new counter-drone tech or pivot to new EW techniques. Modern conflict, driven by this pace of technological iteration, doesn't reward the biggest defense budget alone. It rewards the institution that can iterate its doctrine and tactics the fastest.
The source outlines the traits of winning organizations in this era. They have to rapidly absorb lessons from ongoing conflicts around the world.
treating every skirmish, wherever it occurs, as a massive field experiment. They must update doctrine frequently, not every 5 years, which is the institutional norm, but maybe every 6 months, or even less, and they have to actively encourage experimentation.
And this brings us to the most difficult hurdle, doesn't it? The cultural shift needed to accept controlled failure as a necessary part of learning.
It's the hardest part. If a new tactic fails during a war game, an effective institution sees that not as a source of blame, but as critical data for rapid improvement. An institution that punishes failure breeds risk aversion, rigidity, and intellectual slowness.
And in the AI era, slowness is vulnerability.
Because the enemy is iterating every single day.
I want to push back on this, though. Large defense institutions are inherently built for stability, not agility. How do you force a massive, decades-old organization to learn at startup speed?
You have to create specific institutional mechanisms designed to bypass that inertia. This need for speed is precisely why the source advocates for specific reforms, like establishing the Pakistan Defense Innovation and Fielding Cell, or PDIFC.
And this body would be designed to do what, exactly?
It would be designed explicitly to have the authority and resources to bypass traditional, slow, bureaucratic procurement and testing cycles. Its mission would be to rapidly identify promising new technologies, integrate them, test them in operational environments, and immediately push them out to frontline units. It's an accelerator.
So it ensures the learning cycle is measured in weeks, not years. The institution itself has to become a machine for continuous learning.
An operational adaptation cycle, driven by the overwhelming speed of the new battlefield. That's the only way to keep pace.
So we have completed our deep dive into Mr. Meer's analysis. We've covered the kinetic threats, the invisible domains, and the institutional challenges. The 9 structural disruptors for the 2026 to 2036 environment. Looking at them all together, what is the collective impact?
Collectively, they just shatter the underlying assumption of stability that defined industrial age warfare. That stability relied on predictable timelines, clear domain boundaries, known trade-offs. All those assumptions are now structurally invalid.
The common thread seems to be pervasive multi-domain failure.
It is. Disruption of connectivity, disruption of cost equations, disruption of institutional timelines, and disruption of social trust.
It sounds like a formula for continuous chaos. So if disruption is the new structure, how does resilient defense actually offer a coherent solution?
It solves it by changing the primary goal from prevention to continuation. The doctrine fundamentally shifts the focus from the impossible task of preventing disruption. You can't stop every cheap drone, you can't prevent every cyber intrusion, to the operational necessity of operating through it.
So the decisive factor isn't absolute domain dominance in any one area anymore.
No, it's decision integration. The ability of the entire system to quickly fuse intelligence from multiple highly degraded domains and then execute a coherent, proportional, and timely response.
That concept of graceful degradation and fast recovery rather than perfect defense becomes the ultimate measure of military power in this AI age.
The war is won by the system that absorbs the hit best and recovers the fastest. Resilience is the new measure of national power.
This analysis provides an exceptionally detailed blueprint for navigating the immense security challenges of the next decade. I want to leave you, our listener, with one final provocative thought that ties together the economics of this new era.
Let's hear it.
Given the rise of these incredibly low-cost mass systems, that's Disruptor 2, and the essential strategic role of institutional learning speed Disruptor 9, is the ability to rapidly iterate doctrine and tactics now a more valuable military asset than the sheer size of the defense budget?
That is the trillion-dollar question. Because adaptation, the ability to design, test, and field a new counter-tactic in 6 weeks, is inherently cheap. It relies on human and algorithmic ingenuity.
Whereas platform development and heavy hardware are catastrophically expensive and slow.
Exactly. If the next war is won by the fastest learner, then institutional bureaucracy is truly the adversary's greatest ally.
Thank you for sharing this focused and timely material with us. It gives us a framework for some serious strategic contemplation.
My pleasure. Understanding these structural shifts is the first and most crucial step in adapting to the future of conflict.
Until next time, we've been deep diving into the structural future of conflict.